The Supreme Court, supremely wrong on many decisions, including a devastating blow that it dealt to climate change. The Supreme Court decided that the already gutted EPA was not fucking powerless enough and that they should completely eviscerate it. And its basic string of like destroying American democracy, or at the very least, like, how do I describe it? Not even American democracy, but the theocratic American the American democracy in theory, which never really was a thing. So yeah, let's take a look at what the Supreme Court did, and then we will look at what the Biden administration is doing, or rather not doing, or maybe will do. I noticed all that too. Why the fuck is SCOTUS pushing all this shit out this quickly? I mean, the Supreme Court always goes on a tear like this. It's just that these are some of the more controversial decisions. And the reason why they're doing some of these more controversial decisions is because, and this is going to probably hurt your feelings to admit this or recognize this, but it's because they can. The fuck are you going to do about it? Huh? Are you going to riot? Are you going to revolt? Are you going to arm the fucking working class? Are you going to rise up? No. Are the Democrats going to do anything about it? Of course not. That's it. There's literally no mechanism to even get the Democrats, which are supposed to be functionally on our side, to do the right thing in this circumstance. Yeah, today marks the end of what is surely one of the worst terms in SCOTUS history. We're going to talk about all of this once again to do a recap, but let's start with the EPA ruling really quickly, because man, this is a really great one.
Basically, the lower court had said here that an Obama rule, which regulated carbon emissions from power plants and more broadly regulated power plants and how they should be shifting to renewable resources instead of just coal, they said that that rule was okay, that a subsequent Trump rule was not okay, but the Supreme Court now reversing this and saying that no, the EPA did not have this broad authority that the Obama administration said it did. In addition to that, they've also invoked the major questions doctrine, and this is a doctrine that says if Congress doesn't give explicit power on major issues to an agency, that the agency can't move forward in enacting some of these regulations that concern those major issues. So this is really a blow to the Biden administration and the EPA moving forward on two fronts, and it impacts other agencies and how they'll regulate. This is impacting the administration when it comes to the EPA, saying that they can't broadly regulate power plants, but then agencies as well, saying that if there are these major questions that have political implications, broad economic implications, that agencies basically won't be given carte blanche to regulate here. So this is a major takedown of the administrative state here, Poppy.
It is. Folks, what is currently happening in the United States of America is a super long, decades-long project, almost a century-long project, in undermining federal power. Now, obviously, some nerds are going to say this is a bourgeois government and federal power was always on the side of capital owners regardless, and to them I say, yes, you're right. Because the federal power, if it worked appropriately, would, in many instances, work in an anti-capitalist manner, would work against the profit margins, would work against the profit-seeking interests of corporations, right? What the Republican Party figured out as a successful way to genuinely just do whatever the fuck they want was to implement the age-old strategy that the conservatives in the South had implemented before, which is relegate all the brutality back to the states, the state legislatures. However, the federal government had some tools in its tool belt against said actions. The EPA being one of them, for example. The EPA and other federal agencies are supposed to undermine corporate power at times when corporations will literally not do the right thing. And they're not expected to do the right thing because they are capitalist corporations, of course. These are lifeless institutions that only operate at the behest of their profit margins and their shareholders. What the Supreme Court is doing in this circumstance, is playing its role in undermining federal agencies and undermining federal power, no matter how meaningless it ultimately is. Because the EPA regulation has routinely been eviscerated by prior governments. EPA is also, in many circumstances, and I know that there's some of you in here that actually work in the FDA, work in the EPA, you're brilliant young minds, and you have good hearts, and you have a good attitude, and you truly are probably doing a lot of great things wherever you can. But ultimately, you probably recognize that your bosses are already coming from those very same industries. The DuPont chemical Teflon debacle is like one of the greatest examples of this. Like a lot of the chemical agents that they use that are incredibly toxic for consumption weren't regulated by the EPA because they were the ones who fucking decided whether it was toxic or not. They were working alongside. They were in a collaborative effort with the EPA to figure out what kind of PFAS were actually truly toxic. You know what I mean? How are you going to let these fucking companies dictate what chemicals are actually the most damaging? They're of course going to stop. They're of course going to not reveal the truth. Let's continue with this EPA thing.
And what this ruling does is it takes away the most effective tool for the EPA to curb those greenhouse gases, and that is emissions from these power plants. Power plants are the second largest source of these greenhouse gases. And so I said this yesterday, I'm going to say it again. It is curbing the EPA's ability to regulate power plants and the emissions that come from these power plants is like saying you can cut the grass, but we're taking away your lawnmower. So get out your scissors, EPA, because that is the situation.
So they're just like, they're at, basically they're saying this is not a way that you can regulate carbon pollution. I guess you could technically find other ways of regulating carbon pollution, but we know what the world looked like before the EPA. Filthy. Los Angeles before the EPA. I mean, to be fair, like low key, like the EPA, it's not like things are popping right now. You know what I mean? Okay, so for the record, so here it is. This is a good take. They're saying Congress has to write laws and you can't just delegate powers to agencies, right? It's nice that the Supreme Court said the EPA can only regulate carbon pollution in this way if Congress legislates it. First and foremost, that's not how the fucking federal agencies are supposed to work. But according to the U.S. Supreme Court, that is how the federal agencies are supposed to work. They can only fucking have power granted to them by Congress. Well, that is basically the only way to fucking destroy the power of federal agencies. Because as we all fucking know, Congress is not going to do shit. The entire Republican project hinges on sidestepping Congress, as I've said. Once again, the entire Republican project is about sidestepping Congress and congressional power and relegating all the authority back to states that can enact whatever fucking horrifying policy they want to with a carte blanche approach, with the full knowledge that the Republican-packed courts and the Supreme Court can just solidify states' rights to do whatever the fuck they want. This is the goal. The goal is to sidestep the legislative branch and relegate everything back to the states. They are also probably going to take away federal courts and the powers that the federal courts have in individual states against state legislatures, okay? They're doing that. That's probably something that's going to come up in the next term. There's a North Carolina decision, okay? By the way, yeah, Nixon side the EPA creation shows you how bad it was. Like the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act is being used as like this incredibly intrusive thing. It's like, yeah, it's supposed to be, man. It's supposed to be. Congress already granted them power. SCOTUS is reversing legislation. No, they're saying that the interpretation of the Clean Air Act is a false one. That's what the main purpose of this is. They're basically stating that the Clean Air Act does not give the Environmental Protection Agency broad authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from power plants that contribute to global warming. They're saying you just need to find another way to do it now. You need to pass new legislation to do it now. The decision said environmental advocates and dissenting liberal justice was a major step in the wrong direction, a gut punch, one prominent meteorologist said, at a time of increasing environmental damage attributable to climate change amid dire warnings about the future. The court's ruling could complicate the administration's plans to combat climate change. Its detailed proposal to regulate power plant emissions is expected by the end of the year. Though the decision was specific to the EPA, it was in line with the conservative majority's skepticism of the power of regulatory agencies, and it sent a message on possible future effects beyond climate change and air pollution. The decision put an exclamation point on a court term in which a conservative majority, bolstered by 3 appointees of former President Donald Trump, also overturned the nearly 50-year-old nationwide right to abortion expanded gun rights, and issued major religious rights rulings, all over liberal dissents. They also said that the EPA can't set hard limits on things like CO2, which would stop new coal, and instead can only enforce efficiency standards. The only good thing that came out of this was that they admitted that they could reverse the Trump policy on the first. I always get the fucking legislation name wrong. God damn it. The one Remain in Mexico policy. They can actually, the federal government can reverse the prior administration's Remain in Mexico policy. Here, but to recap the last 48 hours, Biden won't yet support gutting the filibuster to codify Roe, is skeptical about about using federal land in red states for abortion services, has ruled out court reform, and is reportedly set to nominate anti-abortion GOP lawyer for a federal judgeship. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I need you to understand Joe Brandon is not doing enough. He is not meeting what is necessary. EPA just also changed PFAS limits to basically zero. This case could basically say nah to the EPA and make them keep PFAS limits as is until Congress passes the PFAS Very Specific Limit Act or whatever. This Supreme Court case basically says all regulations have to go through Congress, aka lobbyists, every time who write bills making dollars just to do things that EPA scientists used to decide. Yeah. Now, the filibuster reform thing he has gone back on. But it doesn't matter because Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin immediately said they would not, if I'm not mistaken, they said that they would not be in favor of changing the filibuster, which, of course, is perhaps a really solid approach. If you would like to, I don't know, find a stress point, and if you're, let's say, angry, and you want to direct that righteous anger towards people that are standing in the way of progress, this is why I always tell you, go after Democrats instead. Yell at Democrats. Yell at the National Democratic Party leadership for not whipping their caucuses effectively, and yell at the individuals that stand in the way of progress. So we're going to talk about the one good thing that came out of the Supreme Court, but before we do that, like I said, let's take a look. So originally, the Brandon fucking take was what we discussed heavily yesterday with Kamala Harris being like, yeah, we're not going to do anything. Okay, shut the fuck up. But apparently, a lot of the pressure coming from, you know, people like AOC and you guys out in the fucking streets and people yelling at the Democratic Party have gotten to the White House somehow. And they are saying things along the lines of, yeah, maybe we should actually deal with Roe v. Wade. Now, will they actually do it? Probably not. Let me explain something to you. With all of the fucking constant stress placed upon the administration, okay, and you should not stop. You should continue being relentless, okay? All we arrived at is just maybe we'll look into the fucking filibuster thing. Maybe we will look into the filibuster thing. Potentially. Well, Biden now is addressing that he supports removing filibuster to codify Roe v. Wade. He should have ran on this. He should have fucking approached this with this attitude from the jump. Wild that it took this much for him to even say, yeah, we could do that. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are still hurdles in the way. It's better than nothing. Okay, this is the point we're at. No, dude. No. You cannot see this as a fucking W until the filibuster is removed. And even if you make a singular exception, which is incredibly dumb too, just a singular exception for what? Fucking abortion? Or I guess like privacy, protecting the rights of privacy, still not going to work. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to end up doing it. He's saying that because he knows the Senate won't end the filibuster. We'll see.
We have to codify Roe v. Wade in the law, and the way to do that is to make sure the Congress votes to do that. And if the filibuster gets in the way, it's like voting rights. It should be, we provide an exception for this, require an exception to the filibuster for this action. I feel extremely strongly that I'm going to do everything in my power, which I legally can do in terms of executive orders, as well as push the Congress and the public. The bottom line here is, if you care, if the polling data is correct, and you think this decision by the court was an outrage or a significant mistake, vote. Show up and vote. Vote in the off year and vote. That's how we'll change it.
Yeah, sure, bro. How many Democrats would vote against removing the filibuster, though? It does not fucking matter. It needs to be all of them. And it's up. Look, it's not going to happen, most likely. But if you even want it to happen, the only way to achieve such a goal is going to be by applying pressure in the appropriate avenues. And AOC's articulated plan is great, but all of it rests on being able to repeal the Hyde Amendment, which forbids using federal money for abortions. They must get rid of that. Actually, that's not quite true. The Hyde Amendment prevents federal government from financing a clinic itself, but does not necessarily prevent the federal government from leasing land to an independent clinic. This is why we shouldn't dismiss ideas out of hand, but try to thoroughly explore and investigate. Believe Believe it or not, we do our research. Are there any other questions to raise? Sure, but we believe it's worth seriously exploring rather than dismissing out of hand. Many statutes have openings. Biden is being warned that he can't legally guarantee folks who seek abortion procedures on federal land wouldn't be prosecuted. That doesn't sound like a super great solution. Bro, I love this. I fucking love this, dude. What is he doing? What's Hutch doing, man? Is that better than whatever the fuck the Brandon admin is doing? Which is like, yeah, maybe we'll try to help women like go to other states. At this point, you're just like standing in front of people that actually are presenting ideas. Is there a reason they won't put codifying Roe to a vote so they can show who votes? No, I mean, it doesn't matter. It won't even, it will stop. There's a procedure now in the Senate where like, if a bill has enough people saying like, I dissent, I'm going to filibuster this, by stopping it, then they don't even try to put it to a vote. Like, it's not a filibuster proof majority. There's no super majority. So they won't even put it to a fucking vote. So it's no longer even the threat. If it's no longer even like the actual filibuster itself, which is the process in which you can hold up a bill by speaking on the floor of the Senate in unlimited time and like actually physically challenge yourself and physically place yourself ahead of this sort of thing. We've moved beyond that and just people saying, I'm going to filibuster. I think it's called cloture. All that needs to happen is Ted Cruz walking on the floor of the Senate saying, I'm going to filibuster, and then boom, it's dead. Yeah. And the only way to have a filibuster-proof majority is to have 60 senators say, no, we're going to vote against you trying to filibuster this. And they don't even have to do it anymore. Like, no one can be like, all right, do it, pussy, filibuster it. If they brought back the speaking filibuster, no way those geriatric fucks could talk anything out. I mean, you know, there are some advantages. We are witnessing a judicial coup in process. If the president and Congress do not restrain the court now, the court is signaling they will come for presidential elections next. Oh yeah, that's the wonderful next up on the docket for the record is this. AOC is 100% right. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear Moore v. Harper, an appeal advocating for extreme interpretation of the Constitution that could make it easier for state legislatures to suppress the vote, draw unfair election districts, enable partisan interference in ballot counting. This would mean that state legislatures, which are already heavily slanted towards the most reactionary fucking people that have super majorities despite losing the elections otherwise as a consequence of the redistricting, can just turn around and use the state Senate and the state House of Representatives and the red governors to basically say, we're going to nullify your votes. Oh, did you vote Democrat? It's illegal now, for the record. Like, any number of different laws that a state decides at a state legislature, any number of different legislation that the states decide will be totally appropriate, and you can't even take it to the federal courts if that passes, if that interpretation is applied. You will no longer be able to take it even to a federal court. This would fundamentally stop even the fucking way to push back against it. You know what I mean? And for the record, it doesn't even matter because, like, obviously we already fucking know. We already know that, like, even if they did let this pass, even without this decision, we already have a heavily slanted right-wing fucking lower court and a 6-3 supermajority on the Supreme Court. So currently, it's taking at least a year or a couple years sometimes to get it all the way up to the Supreme Court so they can make a decision on matters like this. If this decision passes on Moore v. Harper in the conservative way, they would just basically eliminate the federal court completely in its entirety from having any say over state legislatures taking action. Oof. Anyway, let's do a quick recap. Today marks the end of what is surely one of the worst terms in SCOTUS history. Guns and prayer and abortion got most of the attention, but that's not all the courts did. Here are just some of the court's bad decisions. Rivas Villegas, SCOTUS reversed the lower court to give a cop qualified immunity for using excessive force. Talaquan v. Bond, SCOTUS reversed the lower court to give a cop qualified immunity for killing a man. Shoup v. Tyford, SCOTUS made it harder to get habeas relief. Brown v. Davenport, SCOTUS made it harder to get habeas relief. Shin v. Ramirez, SCOTUS made it harder to get habeas relief. Zubeda, SCOTUS allowed the government to withhold information about torture on CIA black sites. Baello, Madero, SCOTUS denied Social Security benefits to the residents of Puerto Rico. That was another one. Shouts out to Puerto Rico. Cummings, SCOTUS disallowed recovery for emotional distress damages in civil rights lawsuits. Patel, SCOTUS stripped federal courts of jurisdiction to review fact issues in immigration proceedings. Biden v. Missouri, SCOTUS blocked a federal vaccine mandate. Garland v. Gonzalez, SCOTUS denied long-detained immigrants access to a bond hearing. I mean, we kind of gave up on the vaccine mandates anyway. Like, it's just, that was not going to happen regardless. For those of you who are wondering what habeas relief is, it is unlawful detention and imprisonment. Habeas corpus is recourse that is afforded to every person on U.S. soil in U.S. courts that they can report and push back against unlawful detention and imprisonment. And the thing is, this is a process that we avoided. Like, the reason why Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba technically is so that we could deny people that we consider terrorists their habeas corpus laws and unjustifiably detain them without any sort of legal recourse, where they can go to the fucking court system and be like, hey, you're literally imprisoning me. I didn't do anything. Can you please look into this court case? It is like rule number one for human rights, and it is a complete fucking. I mean, we've already been denying the habeas corpus laws. I mean, habeas corpus rights to these people, and it's mostly used on Gitmo detainees. Yes, and this is just a continuation of that. Johnson v. Ortega Martinez, SCOTUS denied long detained immigrants access to a bond hearing. FEC versus Ted Cruz, SCOTUS struck down campaign finance restrictions that enabled Ted Cruz to pay himself back for loans he made to his own campaign. That's nice. Egbert v. Boole, SCOTUS further limited a person's ability to sue federal officers. Viga v. Teka, SCOTUS weakened enforcement of Miranda rights, as we talked about that as well. So, like, cops don't have to serve you, read you your rights, and they can, if you incriminate yourself, then it's fine. They can still use that as testimony. Carson v. Macon, SCOTUS undermined the Establishment Clause, forcing states to fund private religious schools. This is going to be huge. This is a big one. Get ready for that. Kennedy v. Bremerton School District, SCOTUS undermined the Establishment Clause, allowing football coaches to have public/publicized Christian prayers at football games. Putting God back into schools as it was intended, brother. Dinesh P. SCOTUS recognized tribal sovereignty just enough to allow an Indian defendant to be prosecuted twice for the same crime. No double jeopardy. Then Castro Huerta, SCOTUS undermined tribal sovereignty by making tribal land part of the state and allowing state to exercise jurisdiction on tribal land. Now, this is a huge one. So now, even though tribal land is technically not federal land, is just autonomous. The federal government can come in and do whatever the fuck they want. They can also, they can arrest you. They can prosecute you for shit that you've done on tribal land. Bruin, SCOTUS struck down New York's 100-year-old restriction on concealed carry to expand Second Amendment and gun limit restrictions, or limit gun restrictions. So they said states' rights for states when they want to fucking criminalize abortion. No states' rights if you want to stop people from having guns. You can't do that. US v. Texas, SCOTUS allowed Texas' bounty hunter anti-abortion law to go into effect. That's a wonderful one. I wasn't even aware of this one. That's just like a gimme, where they said the bounty hunter, the bounty system to sidestep. They didn't even have to do this, for the record. This is for fun, because they already eviscerated Roe v. Wade. But hey, maybe California should have some fucking fun with this. I'm just saying, blue states with blue legislatures could fucking use the bounty hunter system too. We got an $88 billion surplus. I mean, build some fucking roads and public housing first. But then with the additional money remaining, put a fucking pool of funds together to, I don't know, create a civil, I don't know, if someone's being homophobic, you can sue them. There you go. If someone has a gun, you can sue them. How about that? Use the bounty system. They've allowed you. The Supreme Court allows you to do that. Dobbs, SCOTUS overruled Roe and Casey, eliminating a federal right to abortion enables severe, life-threatening restrictions on abortion to go into effect. We already know that. West Virginia versus the EPA, which was today. SCOTUS undermined the EPA's ability to regulate emissions and fight global warming. And it must be noted that this isn't everything. SCOTUS also did things in the shadow docket, like allow Louisiana's racial gerrymander to stay in effect for the 2020 election, 2022 election, etc. Just a terrible, terrible term. Is this the worst era of politics you've been through? Give me some good news. Yeah, it's pretty bad. On the next term, for the record, for people who are wondering, up next. What's up next for the Supreme Court? Let me tell you. The Supreme Court is going to take up a case about independent state legislature doctrine, which we already mentioned, for the next term, which could give state legislatures far greater power over all manner of election laws, no control over the federal government whatsoever. In the case Moore v. Harper, it's a challenge to the North Carolina Supreme Court's authority to strike down the legislature's extreme partisan gerrymanders under the state constitution. We already know there are 4 likely votes for the legislature. The Supreme Court denies a religious liberty challenge to New York's COVID vaccine mandate on healthcare workers. In his dissent, Thomas claims that COVID vaccines were developed with the use of aborted children. That was pretty fire. Just another, cool, fun thing that he did. Oh, hold on. Some other things. You thought I was done. Up next on the Supreme Court agenda for the next term, get ready for businesses stopping gay people from purchasing their commodities. You like that one? Well, there's more. The destruction of affirmative action. These are all going to be in the next term on the docket. So there's that too. Yep. Oh, also, potentially making it illegal to boycott, stopping the BDS movement exclusively. That's another one too. What else? I mean, who knows, dude? Who knows? Wait, really? Yes, really. Yes. So that's where we're at. Yes, they are taking everything back that happened during the civil rights movement. That is what they're doing in a vengeful manner. Can you explain why all this is happening now? Like, did they just wake up or some shit? Donald Trump became president and put 3 reactionary Supreme Court justices, making the Supreme Court supermajority 6-3. And 2 of them are young, too. Well, I mean, all of them are young. All the new 3 ones are young. So that's what happened. And once that happened, it was over. The Federalist Society had won. A project that they started off in 1982 finally came to fruition. This is like they had everything they needed. Here's more on the North Carolina. The North Carolina State Board of Elections just voted 3-2 not to certify the Green Party ballot access to petition. We needed 13,885 signatures, and the North Carolina Green Party submitted 15,953 verified signatures. We did everything required, and they just said no. Is this what democracy looks like? I know I like to dunk on fucking Green Party, but this is still completely unacceptable that they are just refusing to allow Green Party ballot access. Like, that's so ridiculous. I mean, they're gonna lose anyway, right? Like, but just let them fucking lose. Like, let them literally have ballot access and then get owned, you know? That's fucking ridiculous. Silly question, but why now? Not right after the last reactionary justice was elected? Why didn't they do this under Trump? I don't know why. It's just like, I mean, you see it. Like, the Democrats aren't gonna do anything anyway. And this way, all this shit's happening under a Democratic establishment, a Democratic leadership. They waited for the elections to end, basically. I think they didn't want to do this because this would have galvanized support. And at the time, they didn't know if Donald Trump was going to win or not. So they wanted to wait until the elections were over. And if Donald Trump was president, they were still going to do it. But if Joe Biden became president, they were still going to do it, right? And now they're just doing it. Do you understand? Like, if they did all this shit when Donald Trump was president, it would have solidified that Brandon would win. You know what I mean? Yeah, the ultra majority didn't happen until mid-election with Coney Barrett taking the bench. But also on top of that, like, they were waiting for a term. Like, they can't just like randomly decide. They did start this under Trump. All these cases and decided this term started in 2019 by red states. Yeah, exactly. It took 3 years to get to the Supreme Court. Several of these cases were presented in front of the Supreme Court last year. It just takes a long time. Exactly. I don't think that the timing of it is like suspicious. I think the reason why they didn't do it originally in the last term when Trump was still president was, again, because a lot of the court cases were already in front of them, right? By that point, a lot of the cases they were talking about were already in front of them, but they didn't rule on them because they wanted to hold out, in my opinion, until the election was over. And that's why they waited for this term, especially because at the time they didn't know if Donald Trump was going to be president again. But now, what are they going to do? What are the Democrats going to do? Nothing. They have no power. Or rather, the limited amount of power that they do have, they are not willing to enforce. They are not willing to break the fucking rules. They are not willing to do anything to change the outcome, the process. So what the fuck are they going to do? They just keep throwing up their hands, asking for fundraising, for more money, and telling you to vote harder. I mean, but you have to recognize at this point that, like, it is their job. This is what they do. This is what they are positioned to do. This is what they do best. This is how the party, without any sort of fucking mechanism of pushback, will operate, because the masters are the same. It is the same corporate benefactors. It's the same titans of industry that funneled their funds into the pockets of the Democratic Party. They are the same people that hire their wives, their sisters, their brothers, their children. They're in the same club, a club that you are not a part of. So of course, this whole like, oh man, there's 2 different parties and things would be so different if Democrats were in power shit there's no better representation than that being just a fucking lie than what you are seeing right now. And the very same people that chime in and say, well, it doesn't really matter, like, just because we don't have a filibuster-proof majority or whatever, are just going to always run defense no matter what. If they were old enough to run defense for the Democratic Party, they would have done so under the Barack Obama administration when there was a filibuster-proof supermajority as well. Because those guys are just fucking cucks. Democrats are also ineffective because they are a knit together majority, whereas the Republicans are an insular minority, so easier to act together. It doesn't matter. The main reason is that they are funded by the same people, so they operate at the behest of those same institutions, those same people in positions of power. That's why Chuck Schumer is begging Democrats to go and talk to CEOs to push for the China competition bill. You know what I mean? And one part of this is that there is no mechanism of feedback. There is no mechanism for pushback, because this very same one party state with 2 different parties, one being the controlled opposition, the other one being gross and fucking violent. That process has fundamentally dismantled labor unions and any kind of mechanism to riot, to push back, to hit the power centers. These guys only care about profits, and you control the profits that they generate. How do you control it? Because you work at those corporations. But without any fucking labor union, without any sort of mechanism to push back against that, what are you going to do? You have nothing. You're divided. So they can get away with doing all of this shit. And the Democrats can get away with just being like, look how bad they are. Look how bad they are. Look how bad they are. Especially because the only people that are seemingly still interested in politics and doing something about what is going on are people that are relatively well off. They're definitely a little bit more privileged. And the people that go out and vote are like older. They don't give a shit. They're MSNBC watchers. So they just want to defend the Democratic Party. You know, they're retired. They're privileged. They have a house. It doesn't hit them in the same way. If you're fucking 75 years old and you're retired already, you don't give a shit about like whether your grandchildren are going to survive on this planet or not. Who gives a fuck if the EPA is gutted? They don't care. So that's why when you fucking when you push back and you say, hey man, this fucking bullshit, Democratic Party needs to do something, they can get away with being like, yeah, I don't really give a fuck. How dare you? How dare you shit on the Democratic Party? They're doing their best. They're small beans. Now anyway, so here it is. And this is the grossest part of this, like I said. To recap the last 48 hours, Biden, now he went back on this, but Biden won't yet support gutting the filibuster to codify Roe. He says now that there is an exception that he would like to carve out for the filibuster just for this one specific instance, is skeptical about using federal land in red states for abortion services, and has ruled out court reform and is reportedly set to nominate an anti-abortion GOP lawyer for federal judgeship. He can get away with this because the people that do vote don't really care that much. They just want their team to win.